All right, what's good, everybody? Welcome to the No Level Cap podcast. I am Sage Ashford, and this is the No Level Cap crew, where we bring you all the anime, all the gaming, and none of the bullshit. We back here with episode 8. What's good? But before we start the show, I just want to remind y'all that we are on Spotify, and if you prefer the video version, of course, we are on YouTube as well. And you can check out the bite-sized version of our podcast on TikTok as well, in case your attention span is like all fucked up like mine is. Anyway, so we got to the new news for we finally got some like interesting news, because I feel like for most of April been kind of like low key as far as news. It's really just been finishing up all the big games for the year, and then other than that, it's kind of been like low key. Other than I guess PlayStation Plus Premium, but like who cares? But other than that, like it's been kind of quiet until now. Like now they finally announced Bethesda getting its Bethesda and Microsoft getting their showcase, their game showcase. They of course they did their merger back in a couple of years ago, and now this is the second Xbox and Bethesda game showcase, and it's interesting, or it's cool at least, because like this is the first E3 or summer showcase we've seen, like period. Like there hasn't been any, like ever since like earlier in the year, E3 was kind of in doubt, and then of course we talked about E3 potentially going away, especially since this recent they had to cancel E3 this year, and so like really we was kind of left in the lurch. We had no idea what was happening, what was coming, and then Microsoft is the first people to like speak up, other than Jeff Keighley. Microsoft is the first people to speak up and say we come in and we gonna be on the same day. We're not changing really much of shit. Like we just in here. Coming back, we're gonna do like a little virtual show, and that's gonna be it. So here's my question. I know a lot of us are not Xbox heads. Like I know a ton of us lean more in the favor of PlayStation. I know I have PC. I know Rakeem just recently got a PC, so that's gonna make me ask, like, how do y'all feel like about Xbox Game Pass? Like, Terrence, would you be interested in getting Xbox Game Pass?
I've actually considered it, especially recently, just because you see a lot of the Xbox Series S's in the stores now, just because nobody I guess, is really buying them like that. Like they're really just waiting for the Series X. And I'm not gonna lie, I've considered buying a Series S just to have access to Game Pass and play certain games. I don't know if that would be a good long-term decision, just because Series S just seems like when you buy it, it'll probably be good for like the next couple of years, but then maybe by like 2025, it's not really going to be as relevant anymore. It's going to be pretty much like I'm trying to think of another system that did that, where they had like a lesser version and eventually just I guess it's kind of like the Switch. Well, I was going to say the DS, but I was going to say the Switch Lite, where it just feels like the Switch Lite just feels like that weird in between that. It's like, why would you get a Switch Lite when you could just pay a little bit more and get the regular Switch and get all the benefits instead of like kind of cheapening out? And that's just kind of how it feels with the Series S, is that if you buy it now, you're probably just going to end up regretting it later. But I could see myself buying Game Pass. Like the value is definitely there, especially now that they've revealed their PlayStation Premium, and it doesn't really stack up in comparison to Game Pass. I mean, Game Pass is still undeniably like, it's the Netflix of gaming services right now, in terms of just that Netflix style. We have access to this full library of games, and it's a great thing. No one is touching them, not Nintendo and not Sony at the moment. I would buy it, but I'm just not really a big Xbox guy like that, just because Xbox for me personally just hasn't. I'm not really a console fanboy. I just buy the console that I know the games that I want to play are going to be on. And as of right now...
So let me ask you this. What would be the game that made you go, like, if you're not, like, because like I said, none of us are really Xbox heads like that. What would be the game that make you go like, all right, it's time for me to go ahead and give this Xbox Game Pass?
It'll really need to be like more than one game, just because like one game isn't enough to really buy a whole console for and then just kind of sit there. Although I will say, and this is more so from a fighting game perspective, is that it seems like we're kind of going back to, and I'll just briefly touch on this because this is kind of like more like fighting game jargonish than anything else. It seems like we're going back to the old war of which console runs the game better. And as of right now, it seems like the Xbox version or like the Series X versions of certain fighting games are running a little bit better. And
yeah, there's some like frame delay or like lag in like control. What is it?
It's a matter of frame delay. Yeah, it's frame delay and input delay. That's really what it is, input delay. And it was a factor in previous generations, and it seems like now that for whatever reason, I guess the hardware that the PlayStation 5 has, it just still lags behind like the Series X. I don't know the issue there. Since not a developer, can't really comment too much on it. It's annoying, but it is what it is. But yeah, outside of that, there's not just one singular game. Like I would love to see more of like the Japanese stuff come to Xbox, but it's just time and time has shown that Japan doesn't really mess with Xbox like that. It just is what it is. So I think, and I know we're going to talk about this later, so I'm not going to dive into it. I think that maybe if Microsoft were to acquire like a Japanese developer, I think that could help, but we'll see. If Xbox could somehow start getting like the Final Fantasies again, getting like the big RPGs, maybe like a Devil May Cry, which they're kind of trying to do with Hellblade. Too many Hellblade is, nothing like Devil May Cry, but I mean like that big kind of like more cinematic action game, kind of like the Sony stuff. So we're starting to see efforts from Microsoft, but just to answer your question, right now there's just not one singular game. It's more a matter of just multiple types of genres that I would like to see Microsoft kind of dip their toes more so into. But yeah, that's my long answer to this question, is that I like Game Pass and I would buy it, but as of right now, there's not a ton of games on Xbox to justify the purchase of me buying like a whole system just to get Game Pass.
I mean, I feel you on that. My feelings on Game Pass are kind of complex. I'm gonna get into it when I get around to my turn, but I want to ask Keem, like, you just got a PC. Like, and it's a pretty decent one. Like, when you told me the specs, I was like, oh shit, this is legit. Like, you could play pretty much whatever you want on it right now. So, like, do you see yourself getting Game Pass in like the next, between now and when Starfield comes out? Could you see yourself being like moved to get Xbox Game Pass, and if why or why not?
The short answer, absolutely. And it's funny for me because, as many of you know, I'm a Sony guy too. And when I mean a Sony guy, that was pretty much the console that raised me. I basically was Sony bred and Sony fed, and I thought I was going to be playing Sony until I was dead. PlayStation 1, PS2, PS3, PSP, skipped the PS Vita, I wasn't interested, and PS4, and now I've been even looking into getting a PS5. However, I think clearly, as I've gotten older, I'm starting to look into more things, but outside of loyalty. Sometimes people can be very brand loyal. We've mentioned that before. I am not excluded from that as well. I like certain brands or things I like and enjoy as well, which was PlayStation. But lately, Xbox has been just stepping their game up in a lot of different areas. As far as Game Pass's services and having their games, first-party games like First Day on Game Pass, that's something that's intriguing to me. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. When Sony introduced their service specs and it fell way below what Game Pass did, that was like maybe the nail in the coffin for me. Was like, maybe this exclusivity for me needs to die. And now that I do have this PC, like you mentioned, I got a gaming PC recently. I have been kind of looking into more games, PC games and things of that nature, just to try something different. And I looked into Game Pass as well, kind of thought about the pricing model. And I don't mind trying it. I'm at least can try it out. I might try a few games on there. I haven't played Halo in over 10 years. I don't know if Infinite is the best one to jump into right now, but they still have the classics as well, so I can go back and play those.
I mean, if Halo is the thing, like if you want to give Halo a shot, like it is. The problem with Halo isn't that it was a bad game. From what I understand, the problem with Halo is that people ran out of things to do. Like, if you're new coming into it and you just want to give it a shot, I'm pretty sure they said it was a great game, but the problem was like, once you spent, weeks, months playing it, you were like, all right, well, I'm out of content. So, I mean, and I know you're not going to stick with that game for no months. Like, you go play that game for a few weeks, you're gonna get the fun out of it, and then you're gonna move on to another game that you're like, oh, this game looks fire, and you'll be playing that. So I mean, like, if you want to give it, if like Halo is something that you want to try, I would encourage you to go ahead and give that a shot.
I think that's another thing too for the audience out there. I am what is known as a game dabbler. I am not loyal to one game. I have played a game, stopped playing it, and played something completely different, and then drop a game for 6 months, come back to the other game. I'll drop a game mid-campaign, even though I'm enjoying it, and just play something multiplayer. I have no loyalty. There's often, like, usually once to 2 to 3 months, I start looking at, I start looking at other games. When it comes to gaming, when it comes to regular life, I'm with loyalty, good relationships, no cheating, whatever, be a good man. When it comes to gaming, I'm for everybody out here. I'm for the streets. I'm for the streets. And as far as I'm looking at, yes, and as far as I'm concerned right now, Xbox Game Pass is the whole neighborhood. So I'm working real hard. So I like to dabble in a lot of different games. So that's another reason like the streaming service is kind of appealing to me. Another thing that I guess we're not talking about yet, because it's kind of in the beta phases, the future of like cloud streaming for gaming and things like that. That's something I'm very interested in. And as that evolves, if Sony doesn't catch up and Xbox even advances further in that area, they're really going to have a problem on their hands then.
I mean, my understanding is that you can already play Xbox games on like your phone. Like they have the cloud gaming, and they have like their Xbox Series server blades, I believe they're called, that lets you play Xbox games on your phone. Now, I don't know how the control scheme works. Maybe you hook a controller up to it or whatever. Yeah, but like my understanding is that you already can do that. So like they are, the fact that they're ahead is kind of weird because like didn't Sony buy Gaikai for that?
Yeah, and it's not sitting well with everybody.
Rightfully so. What the hell?
But then again, even with that, it might not have the necessary infrastructure that Microsoft has in that field.
You know what?
Online infrastructure.
You said a word right there. You said
hell no. Hell no. I'm not giving them no pass. That was the whole point of them buying Gaikai in the first place. They did all that hyping up. They was like, yeah, Gaikai's got this futuristic tech. It's going to allow us to stream games in the cloud and all of that shit. And okay, like you've had that. They bought PlayStation Now has been around for some years now. In fact, I believe PlayStation Now is as old, if not older, than Game Pass. So, like, I don't want to hear it. Like, that tech, that Gaikai tech that y'all bought, you bought it so that you could do PlayStation Now. And PlayStation Now has been a thing for multiple years. So, like, I don't want to hear nothing about no infrastructure and all of that. You should have figured that out. It was past time for that shit.
Well, maybe the Gaikai on the way to Lumina sent you.
I don't know why Square had to catch strays. This by Xbox.
Yo, what I'm saying, man. You said,
hey, man, I had to wait 10 years for 15, man. They're going to get some strays. Sorry. But yeah, that's my answer. I'm totally interested in Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah. That's fair. Will, how do you feel? How do you feel about Xbox Game Pass? Would you get it? And if not, why not?
I actually would get Game Pass. Like after constantly like looking over it and everything, I agree with both Terrence and King. It's something I would look into, and plus I look at it as like you just literally been given like this card to walk into this little small like library with nothing but shelves covered in games and services you can use right then and there, like no issue. And on top of that, you can use that card at the front to get them games you try out at a discount. I think that's just one of the most simplistically amazing things you can do with Game Pass. I say get it, go for it. I would right now, even with the computer that I have. And like just like y'all, I'm not big on Xbox, even though as a kid growing up, I did have all the consoles of like one generation at one point. I had PS2, Xbox, GameCube, GBA. I had all of that at one point in my life. I'm an only child. I'm sorry. But yeah, I love my Xbox back then, but I didn't stick with Xbox because I was loyal to PlayStation. Because I've had every PlayStation type of thing going forward. 1, 2, 3, Vita. I never had a PSP. But the Vita kind of covers that anyway. Game Pass for me would be a definite yes. Like, but there's nothing on there at the moment that I would see that would bring me over because while I said I have this PC in my hand, I got this thing called Steam. And I got a ton of games on that. And a lot of them games on Game Pass, I kind of got them sitting in my library right now on Steam. So until Xbox kind of has something, or maybe 2 or 3 some things, that'll be like, hey, you might want to come grab this because this is our thing. You can only play this here, and it looks interesting enough for me to go get a system. Sure, I will go do that. But till then, no Xbox, but I would definitely have Game Pass.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, like, to be fair, that's been Xbox's thing for like a while now. They've been like, and people have been on their ass about it over the last, 3 or 4 years. But I mean, like every year they'll show up with, I mean, in my opinion, every year when they do their showcase, when Xbox does its game showcase, it's one of the best. It's one of the most entertaining, top to bottom. It's well paced. They don't have a lot of filler. They don't waste your time. They have third party. A lot of it is third party games, and it's not a lot of first party games. So I will give them, like, the people that are criticizing them, I'll give those people that. But like, I don't really go, like, I'm not that much of a console extremist. Like I kind of am. I'll explain that in a second. But like, since I've gotten older, much like Rakeem, I just don't have that same brand loyalty anymore. And so like when I go to see especially during E3 time, or like, I guess we'll have to get used to calling them summer showcases or whatever. But during that time of year, I'm not there to like, oh, who won, who lost. Like the last time I did that was when PlayStation 4 won E3, when they first announced the system, and they were like, this is how you loan a video game, and with PlayStation, like, okay, that was cute. And then we all kind of agreed, like, oh, Sony kind of won that, even though Xbox really in the long run won that, because like that's how we do games now. Like digital became the wave. Like physical is dying off more and more. So Xbox was right in the long run. They just went about it the wrong way. But never mind. Like when I go in, I like look at it and I'm like, okay, well, this is a lot of really cool games, and that's really all I care about when I go to a summer showcase. I want to see the games, and I feel like Xbox shows you the games just directly. They don't waste a lot of time. Their showcases tend to be really tight, 90-minute presentations where they don't waste a lot of time. They get the games out like that, and the next thing you know is like, okay, before you get bored with them showing off one game, they've moved on to the next one. And I feel like the big criticism people have had is that Xbox has not enough first-party games. And they've been trying to rectify that, building out studios and buying studios, a lot of acquisitions going on. We're going to talk about that a little later in the show. But like, they bought a lot of studios since going back to like 2017, really just about since the dawn of Xbox Game Pass. And I feel like it takes time to develop like games in the modern era, especially games that are going to be like in that AA to AAA area. You need a good 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, sometimes 7 years. I always talk about Horizon and how Horizon, they started work on that sometime in 2011 and they didn't finish it until like 2017. That's like 6+ years on one game. That's how long it took. And that's how long it took for a PlayStation 4 game back in like PlayStation, like 2017. It's probably going to take longer now as you develop assets for like 4K and 8K. It takes longer now. So I'm not surprised that it's been a long time, but I do feel like Xbox over time has been showing you like, yeah, we've got games coming and we have all these studios. Like those studios are not just sitting on their hands, or as I like to say around the house, they're not just holding dick in their hands. Like they're not just doing nothing. Like they're working. They're not just holding dick in hand. I promise you. So
Monday.
Yeah, they meet out Monday over there for them. So like eventually they have a lot of games that they're gonna wind up showing. And I do feel like we're getting closer and closer to that. Like last year, they had like, to me, Xbox had the best showcase. I know the Nintendo fans, it was, oh, Nintendo came and saved. They ain't saved shit. It was Xbox. The Xbox show was solid as a motherfucker. Redfall looked cool, and there was Contraband. I was pretty excited for Contraband. And they have a lot of games that are coming. Like there's Machine Games, the people that do Wolfenstein. They're working on an Indiana Jones game. That should be pretty cool. Like they have no shortage of studios and they have no shortage of projects. So that's a long way of saying I am going to get Xbox Game Pass. Like I'm on PC. I've been on PC for like a while now. I've basically moved over to PC because you can't find PlayStation 5s. If you make me get a console, it'll always be Sony first, just because Sony gets all of the Japanese titles. And I mean, like I like JRPGs too much to turn that down. And then they do have Spider-Man, and I fuck with Spider-Man heavy. So I mean, like ultimately, if I get a console, it's going to be Sony first. But as long as I got a PC, why would I not take advantage of Xbox Game Pass? The only thing I'm doing, there's nothing on there right now that I absolutely need. So I'm kind of waiting for like Starfield to come because like that's a game that's pretty exciting. But we're gonna talk about that in a second. Um, so yeah, I am hyped for that particular. For I am hyped to get into Game Pass and hopefully to see them grow and develop and add new games and kind of compete with Sony at that AAA space. So I mentioned Starfield because a couple of years ago Microsoft bought Bethesda. Well, you would have thought they would be done spending all that fucking money, but they were not. They was like, nah, that was cool. I know y'all thought that was big news, but like, wait till you see what the next trick is. And everybody like, what next trick? And apparently the next trick involves spending, I believe, somewhere in the area of $69 billion to acquire Activision. Like, Jesus Christ. So there's a lot that goes into that. And I mean, like, one thing that we have to talk about is that Activision has a really shitty guy in charge, Bobby Kotick. He fucking sucks. Like, every day, every other week, it feels like there's a new news report about some awful thing he's done to the people that work there, or people that he just comes into contact with. There was a story about him fucking with some airline like pilot, like I forget what they call them, like the airline attendants. Like, he was fucking with them. Like, he had some, like, and then he said some wild shit like, I'll ruin you if you say anything, or some. This motherfucker actual supervillain. So, like, on the one side, it's pretty much assumed that if Microsoft, like, the shareholders, I believe, approved of it. And so, like, the deal is, like, it's got a pin, some FTC shit that goes in. I'm not going to pretend like I know all of it. But, like, there's a process, and that shit takes a while. But if it all goes through, there's a better chance than not that Kotick is out of there. And that is a net positive. However, is it a net positive overall when you consider like the consolidation that's in the industry right now? Like, I'm not really liking what I'm seeing as the industry continues to shrink and like these big giant fucking gaming giants and tech giants just start snapping up corporations. I mean, like it was one thing when they were buying developers. Activision ain't no developer. That's a whole publisher, and a huge one at that. They make a lot of games that make a lot of money. Call of Duty, setting GTA aside, because that motherfucker come out once every 15 years. Call of Duty is like the biggest fucking console franchise there is. It sells, even when it sells like shit, it outsells your favorite franchise, I'll guarantee you. That's insane. And they do it every fucking year. That studio is huge, and Microsoft was like, give me that. So I'm not comfortable with that. I'm just not. Like, I understand, like, I'm happy if they get Kotick out of there, that's cool. But overall, I'm uncomfortable with the way things are going. Rakeem, how do you feel about this?
Be honest, it's almost like a terrifying time to be a gamer because we're watching companies that we loved being acquired and moved as assets. And there's no way in the long term this isn't going to have an effect on some of our franchises. This will have an effect on like maybe the quality of the games that come out, the direction the game's going. Because once a company is acquired, depending on the culture of the company they go into, they might think of an entirely different direction for that series or that company. Not to mention, like, we're already witnessing things like in other industries, like with the Discovery merger with WB, and how like shows are being cut off.
You said word.
Games are being, the games are probably getting, they're talking about right now with WB trying to sell off their games division. Although it's probably the third or fourth time trying to sell it off. To be honest, they've been trying to get rid of that thing for a long time. They didn't want it in the first place. So for me, I have a sense of trepidation. Because on one hand, with the acquisition of Activision Blizzard, as a fan of some Blizzard games, and being a fan of like Overwatch and Diablo, the stain that news came out about all the issues they've been having in the workplace really hurt me. Because I fell in love with Overwatch, I fell in love with Diablo when I was in my college years, and those are franchises that are dear to me. But at the same time, you can't quite enjoy things the same way while you're playing them when behind the scenes workers are being mistreated or the company's culture is messed up. And we're seeing that kind of overlap into the games now. Like Overwatch 2's development has been rocky. They've lost leadership. They've lost confidence in their player base. And when you lose confidence in your player base, where even the diehard Blizzard fans aren't defending them anymore, that right there already left a bad taste in my mouth. The acquisition was like this weird sense of false hope that things may be changing for the better. And then it sets in that, oh, this is happening everywhere. Sony's buying studios, Microsoft's buying studios. When they bought Bethesda last year, even though I think the news I don't know if some news already broke it earlier, I was kind of shocked because it never dawned on me in my mind, even with all the negative stuff, that Bethesda would be a publisher that be bought out by a bigger entity because they've been such a juggernaut of the industry for so long. That's like seeing freaking Burger King get bought by McDonald's.
Mm-hmm. Shit.
That's like that. Just like something you just didn't think you'd see in their lifetime. But I think we have to realize that things in gaming are probably going to change as far as like these acquisitions, and we have to be scared of any company we really like, especially independent companies that do well. We have to be prepared that those companies could be acquired. There's already been news lately that FromSoft might be in the process of being acquired by another company. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. But obviously, with the success of Elden Ring, they've become quite popular and way more enticing for people to kind of want to acquire them into their banner. The only thing I fear is that developers might lose jobs in cases, when they're acquired by other companies. The games we love, some things might change about them. They might get caught up into the thralls in the industry, the microtransactions, the DLC BS, and that's things I'm kind of worried about. So that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, I'm always have this sense of trepidation. There was a slight sense of hopefulness, but at the same time, I kind of feel like things are going to change, and I think we're not going to like where they're going to be headed in the future.
I absolutely concur with a lot of like damn near everything you just said. One thing I want to point out, and you did kind of hint around, is that Bethesda did make a few mistakes. Like, they had a couple of games that didn't sell well, and that's a big problem in the modern industry. Like, games that cost so much to make. Like, if y'all, when y'all hear me talk about it, I bang that drum a lot in the Discord. I bang that drum a lot when me and Keem talk in real life. Like, we talk about this a lot. I'll talk about how expensive games are, and like, they have to hit now.
Yeah.
A few fuck ups, and that's it. That's your ass, Mr. Postman. Like, it don't take much. Like, I remember, I don't know if y'all remember, around a couple of years ago, Bethesda had that Save Player One thing where they were trying to like talk about the importance of like single player games. And then the following year, all of a sudden they were hyping up all these multiplayer experiences because that's where the money's at. And they had, all it took was just a few games. Those games weren't even bad. Like, most of Bethesda's output over the last few years have not been bad. It's been good. A few middling games, of course they had Fallout 76, which they fixed eventually, but like, most of their games have been good to great, and yet they just didn't perform well. And that was all it took for this giant publisher to be like, look, we in the market. Like, anybody willing to buy us, come pick us up, bro. Like, we need help. And it's going to be a lot of that. Like Keem said, like, this is not going away. This is the future now. Like, I remember seeing this thread on Twitter. I think Shinobi602 did it. And it was this long list of developers. And it was like, look at all these, you concerned about acquisitions. Look at all these new developers. And I'm like, do you know how expensive games are? It would take nothing for Sony to look at one of these game studios and be like, we like what you're doing. How would you like to be bought? And unless that studio has a specific mindset of, no, we want to remain independent, they'll probably say yes. And not just Sony. I don't want to seem like I'm trying to be a console fanboy. I know how weirdos are. Like Microsoft, NetEase is out there. Like, people don't think about that. Like, all those big studios, like all those big different companies from other countries and shit, like, that are trying to buy up studios and buy up talent. Like NetEase, I believe, are the ones that bought up well, not bought, but like, they hired away the creator of Yakuza. Am I wrong, Will?
I think you're right about that, if I remember correctly.
Was it Tencent or NetEase?
I want to say that was Tencent that did that. They got him and a good bit of that team out of Sega, and he's gone with them now. They're still planning the Yakuza 8, but
yeah. So like, but you see how quickly that shit happens. Like, people with big pocketbooks will come along, and it's like, yeah, we're working on a game, and we really want to get this game made. And I mean, like, instead of going around begging for venture capital and shit like that, you can just have somebody say, like, look, bro, like, we'll buy your studio and you ain't gotta worry about that no more. And that's the end of that independent studio. Like, unless they have the mindset of that. So it's not going away, just like Keem said. And I will say about FromSoft, before I move on and ask Will how he feels about this whole thing. FromSoft is not independent. It's owned by Katakawa. And FromSoft might have been cheap a few years ago, prior to Bloodborne, really. But like post Bloodborne, post Sekiro, and certainly post Elden Ring, it ain't what it used to be. Like you'd have to talk it out with Kadokawa and be like, how much money would it take to buy this? So I'm not as concerned. Stranger things have happened. We are currently discussing a stranger thing that did happen in Activision being bought. But I would be surprised if From Software sold just because Kadokawa was probably like, nah, this motherfucker making us money and it's gonna keep making us money. So Will, how do you feel about Activision being bought?
Well, for ActiBliz, Blizzard, Vision, whatever you want to call them, for them being bought, I'm not gonna lie to you. When I sit back and I look at it, I'm like, that's a lot of stuff that just went to Microsoft's way. I'm not gonna lie to you, because I had to actually look up how much they spent because I wanted to see. And you said around 69 billion. Yeah, that's about right.
That, yeah.
Yeah, and I looked at a list of the things that could be there. We know the obvious being Call of Duty and a couple other things, but then someone was like, in that article, they were mentioning like maybe they could do something with these properties. Like we know that they just had Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 come out, and then there's also them having Crash Bandicoot, or hell, maybe even something as obscure as Pitfall, because that's an Activision property, you know. And when I and when I and when I looked at that, I'm just like, man, that's, I'm not gonna lie, while I like the sound of some of this, I'm like, this is a lot of hopeful thinking that they could probably take these things and represent them to the world. And I wouldn't mind that as someone on the outside looking in, not really being a business type of guy. But I had to ask myself, can they take stuff such as Tony Hawk? Can they take things such as Spyro, Crash, Pitfall, and so on and so forth and do it? The only thing I see them probably changing is Call of Duty. And I think the biggest thing that come out of that is spacing it out further instead of making it be such a every year type thing. We know Call of Duty gonna sell at any given moment. This is coming from me knowing, playing, and working at a GameStop. We know it's gonna sell. But I just think that, like Keem said, we're gonna see a lot more of these companies kind of get sucked up. And I don't know what's gonna happen to a lot of those properties. It makes you wonder, is something you love gonna disappear soon? Like it makes you wonder, man. Like, is something you love gonna leave? Is something you love gonna get reintroduced by a new team, or have some extra people thrown in to try to make it more than what it is or less than what it is? Are we gonna continue to see these games anymore? Like, are they just gonna kind of die off? It makes you wonder.
I definitely agree. Now I will say, I will give another positive. We can look on the positive side for a second.
Sure.
One thing I heard, and y'all might have heard this too, is that Microsoft ain't really interested in an annual Call of Duty.
Okay.
Like they've talked about, like, yeah, we kind of they don't need it. They have Halo, they have Gears, they have shooter franchises, and they, like at this point they have a massive stable of IPs that they can rely on. So they don't need annual Call of Duty, and we could see perhaps a biannual Call of Duty, every 2 years or something like that. And that would give Activision the space to maybe take some of them fucking developers off of Call of Duty and let them go back to like Raven Software used to make some pretty cool shit. Like, didn't Raven Software make Ultimate Alliance?
I think Ravensoft did that. They did a shooter back in the day that was different from Call of Duty called Singularity on the PS3. Because I played that and I love Singularity, man. That was a great one. And they did a few more things. I know they touched a few RPG type games though. I know they done that.
Yeah, I believe that was them that was responsible for like the X-Men Legends and the Ultimate Alliance and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then also High Moon Studios. Like High Moon Studios did a pair of amazing Transformers games. And I'm still pissed about that. I'm going to come back to that in a second when we move on to the next topic. What's up, Keith?
Oh, by the way, I had to double check and confirm it was NetEase that acquired the Yakuza developer.
Okay.
It was NetEase.
Thank you.
All right.
just want to make that clarification.
Keeping us honest. I appreciate y'all. That's what's up.
I appreciate you.
Do the research. But yeah, I mean, like that's just the thing. Like it could perhaps free some of those developers and allow them to work on something that isn't fucking COD. Because like it's wild looking at like trailers for COD. Even though I don't play COD, I do watch a lot of Warzone. It's kind of fun in a way. But like I don't play COD, but I see the trailers, you know, keeping up with the industry, and it should just say Call of Duty Studios. And it's like, hell, that's just Activision at this point. So hopefully in the near future, like if it does go through, Microsoft can be like, all right, we don't need that much COD. Let's reel it on in and do something else. But but Terrence, how do you feel about Activision like being bought by Microsoft and where all this consolidation is going?
In terms of Activision themselves, it'd be just interesting to see how them being under Microsoft now really changes everything. Because the thing with Microsoft, when they did acquisitions in the past, which is why usually when they announce acquisition, I'm kind of like, well, what are you really going to do with them though? Because this goes back to the Xbox 360 era when Microsoft acquired Rare. Like back then, that was pretty game changing because Rare was at the top of their game at that point. It felt like Rare was putting out such quality products for Nintendo, but really mainly for Nintendo. And it just always seemed like Rare would, if anyone were to buy Rare, it would be Nintendo. But when Microsoft grabbed them, it was like, oh, well, that was unexpected. And then I guess the other unexpected thing about it was the games that came after them being acquired is like Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts. Was it Cameo? The something of power that
was that them?
I'm pretty sure that was Rare, right?
I know exactly what game you're talking about.
I do too.
Is that good?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was Rare, but also like Perfect Dark Zero, just the games that were put out at that time, they were kind of like, man, it wasn't the Rare that we were accustomed to when they worked with Nintendo. And I said all that to say is that Microsoft, they're really good at making like power moves or just big moves in the background. But it feels like so far we haven't seen the true fruits of that labor. But I am curious to see maybe as we get toward the end of this decade how this acquisition really changes the landscape of everything. Because like you all have mentioned, like obviously you have Call of Duty. Well, I guess just on the Activision side, yeah, you have Call of Duty. Like Will, you mentioned, Tony Hawk. Because I was looking at a list of pretty much like the big games that Activision has out right now, the Crash games. So it'll be just interesting to see how, if Microsoft does go down like the exclusivity route in terms of making it like exclusive to console, to Xbox and PC. And
that's been confirmed. They're not doing that.
They're not doing that?
Specifically for Activision, they talked about how when they first got into like big acquisitions, not Rare, but like during the Xbox One era, when they bought Minecraft, and they were like, Minecraft, we put it on everything, and they talked about how they want to get most of Activision's games onto everything. They want to get them back onto the Switch if possible. So they're not actually doing that. I'm surprised, but that was like, and this was on like CNBC. So like it wasn't on no gaming outlet. They were being interviewed by somebody on CNBC to talk about it. So
yeah, well, if they don't go the exclusivity route, it's kind of one of those things where you don't acquire a big company like that just to keep your stuff flowing out to everybody. There has to be something on the back end that they're doing to make it worth their while. And, what that is, I don't know. But as of right now, I don't know if it's necessarily a good or bad thing. Like in terms of like you all have mentioned, like the consolidation of like all these companies into one another. It's kind of like when Sony kind of was kept up screwing up Spider-Man, like the movies, and people were like saying, oh, you better stop screwing up, Disney will mess around and acquire you. It's like, you all really don't know what you're asking. You're asking this huge company to acquire another huge company, and you just don't want that. That's not really what you want. No matter how big of a fanboy you are, you got to take a step back and realize that, these big companies kind of like nabbing up, gobbling up each other. It's not really good for us in the long run, just because that competition will no longer be there and there's nobody that can really challenge them. Because if you have just this one company that's swallowing up all these others, who's really going to be able to challenge them in the long run? And so I do think that there can be some good to maybe some of these acquisitions, but I don't want it to be an overwhelming trend to where every year we're hearing about bigger and bigger acquisitions. You know, I don't really want like FromSoft to get bought. I don't want like Square Enix or Capcom really to get bought. Honestly, if they were going to get bought, I feel like it should have been done a long time ago. Like some of these companies, I feel like now they can fully stand on their own. Like Capcom during the PS3 360 generation, PS3 360 generation. Yeah, they looked like they were struggling for a bit. If there was a time to buy them, that was the point.
Yeah.
But
Square too.
Yeah, Square as well. So now that those companies are thriving on their own, I just really don't want to see them get bought just because I would prefer them to be independent as opposed to changing the console wars from. I don't want this generation to become a war of acquisitions, I guess, you know, because
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like it's kind of a weird territory that we're in. So I can see the good and the bad from it, but yeah, I just don't want us to go down the route of this just being an acquisition war for this specifically for this generation. So how I feel about Activision is, you know, I don't know. We'll just have to see Microsoft's long game on this one, because I think that's really what it's all about, is like what's their end game.
Things. You said Rare. You brought up Rare, and one thing I will say is that you're right. Rare went way off the beaten path for a while, but I feel like they kind of found themselves again with Sea of Thieves. Like I might not like it. Yeah, I didn't like it. I don't know how the rest of y'all feel about it. I mean, like I've never heard y'all talk about playing it, but like it does have that Rare feel to it, and it's pretty successful. Like it's on its, I don't know, 5th or 6th year, something, 4th or 5th year. It's been going for a while now. I believe it started in 2018, and like they really found that. At first it was like No Man's Sky, and now it's like No Man's Sky.
No Man's Sky.
Like it's one of those games where like everybody was like, what the fuck do you do in this game? And then all of a sudden they just like, oh, this is what you do. Like you make your own fun, and it's very much a sandbox, and you go into the world and hang out with your friends, and you go find other pirate ships of other people, and you take them down, and you get taken down, and you try to find as much gold as you can. And like they figured out a way to make that fun, and we'll see. They have another IP that they're working on, Everwild, I think.
I know what you're talking about.
I remember they said they didn't know what the fuck they were doing with it. And I mean, like, that's actually somewhat common in the video game industry, that like developers sometimes don't know what they're trying to do with the game. They have some vague ideas, and they eventually put something together into a game that works. So,
yeah, and they're also working on that new Perfect Dark, although it sounds like that's kind of is looking kind of murky. You talking about Rare?
I think
right?
that is them.
No, I don't think they are. Hold on, there is a Perfect Dark game in the works. I do not think it is Rare.
Oh, it's not Rare this time?
Yeah, I think the studio is the Initiative, and I know for a fact that Crystal Dynamics, the people that worked on Marvel's Avengers,
they tossed them into the mix. Yeah.
So I think it's the Initiative.
Okay. Well, supposedly, regardless of who's making it, supposedly that game isn't looking too hot right now in terms of its development. So
really,
that's the last that we heard about it, was that since they tossed Crystal Dynamics in the mix, that's kind of made it a little weird. Where I don't know. That's just what I've heard on, is that the development for the game isn't looking too shabby right at the moment. So I imagine that's probably not something we're going to see at this June. Well, this is Microsoft and Bethesda, but we're just at Microsoft's like premieres in general, like this summer. I don't really think we're probably going to see much of it. That's
actually a great point. I was going to ask like what games y'all thought would be there, but the other question I wanted to ask, and I'll ask you first. We don't need like a super long answer from anybody, but since you kind of talked about console war, do you feel like, first off, I feel like the console war is worse now than it was last gen. Am I crazy? Like, I feel like there are more people talking about Xbox and Sony Pony and all this other bullshit. And I feel like these acquisitions have low-key made it worse. Am I tripping?
There is this sense of, I don't know, it's really weird now. There's this sense of people have gone from fanboys to like full-on company defenders, like even company policies and stuff like that. They'll defend it. I don't know. It's a really
lot of bootlicking. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, it is really weird. I guess to like answer your question about do I think it's worse? It does kind of feel like that to an extent. I don't know. It definitely it's gotten more so from being like just this childish, like ha ha ha, me us versus them kind of thing, to it being about like these big corporations. They don't need you. They don't need you in in their corner. It's like they're worth millions of billions of dollars. They don't need like this little. I don't want to put how should I put it, like they don't need this person who's like working just like a regular.
Eon.
They don't need peasants.
Yeah, okay, let's go with that. They don't need peasants in their corner fighting for them. Hey, if you like something that a company is doing, feel free to speak about it, but you don't have to act like their public relations or their marketing department or anything. They're not paying you.
And like, in fact, it's the opposite of y'all not being paid. You paying them. Like, you coming out the pocket. And games cost more now than they did last gen. Like, now it's $70 a game for like AAA games, and you over here like standing them for what? They ain't did shit for you. Like, am I tripping? Like, what's wrong with y'all?
You're not tripping, Sage. Trust me. I see enough of it myself. Whenever I'm scrolling down Twitter, I'm just like, bro, play your games and enjoy your life, bro. Quit doing this shit online. No one is going to come give you a suit and a tie and a job. They don't want you.
Amen.
Just play your games, bro. Buy them. Go home, relax.
Yeah. Y'all see the when Forbidden West came out and they were like, oh, look at this animation. It's identical to, who cares? And if Xbox did something like that too, I'd be like, who cares? Like, mind your business. Like, whatever side you on, if you're an Xbox fan, that's great. If you're a PlayStation fan, that's great. Go play that and shut up. Or play everything. But shut up though. Like, I don't understand what's all this. What's the deal with the tribalism? Like, what do you get out of that?
Nothing.
Now look. Sony workers, Xbox workers, y'all can't fool us. Y'all on y'all burner accounts. Y'all hiding behind these accounts and just try to just feed the fire every time you see something, man. You can't fool us. Developers. KD, I know it's you, KD.
KD's got a burner account.
He got a burner account.
But yeah, man,
it feels like that, man. Sometimes, like, I've noticed it. So I'm not even gonna point out any specific community because they're gonna flame me online for our community. But certain game communities are just like that in general. And then, like, what's the community that's kind of like that? A certain action RPG community that involves characters of colorful, lighthearted affairs connected on the side can be very, 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 very hardcore and tough to be around online that I will not mention, for example. But yeah, like the tribalism in Sony versus Xbox, I think the reason it feels like it's worse now than it was before is because people are even more vocal online, more comfortable talking online, and more comfortable trolling than they've ever been.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, at this point, one day we could have a troll just show up and just be on our page, and he don't even know who we are. He's just like, hey, I just like trolling people today, and just do it over and over again. These people do not care. They just be online all day, just trolling. And if you can piss enough people off, it doesn't matter if you actually believe the stuff you say, because people will talk about like, oh man, he's Sony, this Xbox stuff. This man might not even have an Xbox. He just wants to piss people off. But on the flip side of that, I think a part of it is like there was a time when the console wars is almost like pushed a little more, like it was really emphasized more in like articles and media and like even people like Kind of Funny Games has like a PlayStation section, like PS I Love You and stuff like that. That kind of like, even though that's not like that's not an example of that's not an example of where
you're coming from, but yeah. I've noticed that was more of like that was what they had the expertise in, and now they actually have a Xbox section too. So they kind of they spread the love. Like they have an Xbox section, like an Xbox podcast. They have a PlayStation podcast. They've talked about getting a Nintendo podcast, and I feel like a lot of gaming companies gaming media is doing that now, like trying to get something for everybody. So I agree with you. Like it was a media thing. Now it feels like it's gone beyond that.
Yeah. I think a part of that too is like once you've locked yourself into this for a long time, because I just told you I was Sony bred and Sony fed. I thought I was playing Sony until I was dead. And I was locked in there before I even realized like you couldn't lock yourself into a community and like just shit on Xbox all the time. Cause I'll tell you our personal experience. Once I got the red ring of death, I didn't want to see nothing Xbox ever. I was done with that company. That was the most pissed off I think I'd ever been as a gamer. I stopped playing games for like a whole year. I went back to PS2 for a little while. I was so pissed off. Until I finally got my PS3. I was really angry about that. So I had almost like a personal vendetta against Xbox. But I outgrew that over time, man. You know, it's petty. You know, it's just some machine failure. Some people don't outgrow that stuff, man. They hold those like that spite and that anger and like that, you know, that anger towards this culture. It's kind of like a rival school. Like you're in college, like I went to Mississippi State students, all of us went to Mississippi State, in fact. You know, Ole Miss, that was our rival. And it's just coming to state for a lot of people, F Ole Miss forever. Like, it don't matter if they had, I don't care if y'all got a medical school and great people and all that, F y'all. We don't care. We're Mississippi State. It's like that. Like, sometimes you have those petty rivalries, and they're still permeating the culture, even in gaming.
You're not wrong, even though I feel like we're not getting not a damn thing out of it at this point. Like, it seems like it's worse now. Like, yeah, like it seems like it's more of a reason now to just play everything. And I mean, like, I feel like console wars, there was a reason to pick a console when you were young. You could only afford one.
Yeah.
Your mom, your dad, they was only willing to buy one for you. Even if your parents could afford more than one, it's like, look, you don't need all them consoles. You got one. You take that one and you take your little ass in there and do some homework. Now, like all of us are grown. Like, go buy what you like. Like, I'm interested in Xbox because I'm starting to see. I mean, they bought hella RPG companies. Like, I'm like, okay, let's see what type of RPGs y'all come up with. You know, Starfield, I'm pretty hyped for, which helps me segue into this next segment. Xbox is gonna have probably 90 minutes, maybe a little longer since it is Bethesda there, but it's gonna have probably 90 minutes of games there. And I just wanted to ask, like, is there a game that you would want to see from them? Now, I know in my case, the game I want to see the most is Starfield, like far and away. I'm tired, so tired of Bethesda's marketing for Starfield. Like, it's always, here's some concept art, this is what the music of the game gonna sound like, this how we feel about how we developed it. All of these things would be things I'd be super excited for after I knew what the game looked like. But before seeing what the game looks like, I'm like, man, y'all could y'all want to see them games, them trailers or them commercials of like a mobile game, and they'll show you some in-game cutscenes that look fire as hell, and then they'll finally show you what the game looked like in the last 10 seconds of the trailer, and it looked like ass, it looked like every other mobile game you've ever seen. It could be that. And I mean, obviously it won't be that ridiculous, but like, I have no idea what this game looks like. And like, y'all show me all this concept art, don't do a damn thing for me, because the concept art could be fire, and I look at the game and I'm like, oh man, this looks boring as hell. I'm not interested. So like, I want to see, like, that's the game I want to see from them the most. I kind of want to see Avowed. That's Obsidian's new game. It's set in the same universe as, I think, Tyranny. No, not Tyranny. Pillars of Eternity.
Oh, okay, it's the same universe. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I believe so. And it's supposed to be like a AAA game, but I'm only kind of interested in that because it's supposed to be first person. Starfield is, you know, mixed first and third. You can switch perspective. So obviously, I'm a third person only type of gamer. So Avowed, I'm only sort of interested in. And then they have a couple other IPs. I want to see Fable, but I don't think Fable's gonna be there. I think that Fable and Avowed are kind of too similar, like two big AAA fantasy RPGs. I don't know if they'll be willing to show both at the same time. They might. And then last year they showed Contraband. The game, like, they didn't show it, but they hinted at it. It was like this game made by them and Avalanche. And like the idea of it, of like doing all these heists, that's kind of low key what I wanted Uncharted to do next. I wanted them with Uncharted, if we weren't going to get Nathan Drake anymore, I wanted it to be like Chloe and Nadine, and maybe you get Sully and they all go on like heists together across like different parts of the country and shit like that, or maybe just one open world area where you can go to different spots and steal shit. I wanted that, and hopefully that's what Contraband is. It seems like it is mixed single player and multiplayer, so like you can play co-op with your friends, and you can play solo. I'm pretty hyped about that. Hopefully we see it. We might not because it seemed like it might be early in development, but I'm pretty excited either way. So like those are a lot of Xbox games that I'm pretty excited to see. Hopefully, Rakeem, is there any one? Well, I won't say one. Are there any games that you were excited to see from Xbox?
Absolutely. So since they've had the Bethesda acquisition, specifically, I am also very hyped for Starfield. As you know, because we talked about this many times, we both share a love of sci-fi in media, and there's not enough representation of sci-fi across games in general. It's sometimes they lean into it some years, and most of the time, no, just no.
A lot of times they miss the mark, really.
Yeah. The last big sci-fi franchise, really, although Obsidian had their sci-fi RPG recently, it was like their Fallout successor, was Mass Effect. You know, like the big franchise was like that celebrated. It was mainstream. People were talking about it, and it's taken. Now they're kind of almost rebooting Mass Effect again because of the reception of the last game. It's going to be a while since we see that. So I'm very excited to see what Starfield looks like. Now that I have a PC, I kind of want to see the interactivity on the PC. I don't know if this probably will not be on PlayStation for all we know.
No, that's confirmed.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm definitely excited for Starfield. Now, Fable is the other one. Obviously, like you said, it probably won't be at the conference, but for me personally, I'm excited for Fable because I was a Fable 2 player, and I really, really like that game. And just the uniqueness of Fable is inherently such an Xbox experience because there's been one, on Xbox and on Xbox 360. It's their franchise, their RPG franchise, their Zelda, if you will. And they, after the third game, the popularity kind of dwindled down from there. They had some mishaps. I think they tried to do a spin-off game. It didn't work out. They had to cancel it.
Canceled, yeah.
Yeah.
Fable Legends, I think.
Yeah, so this is their chance to kind of bring that IP back to the forefront. And on top of that, like you mentioned earlier, other things I'm interested in, just what is inXile working on right now? Like the Wasteland developers.
It's supposed to be some kind of first-person shooter RPG that they are. It's like AAA type thing. So yeah, they are working on something. I don't know if we see it at this show, because they do have a lot of because it won't if it is a 90-minute show, you gotta figure Starfield's gonna take up a good chunk of that time.
Yeah,
you gotta figure that. And then of course you have like a few other games. Maybe they show a little Halo because Halo fans kind of lost faith in the franchise a little bit. And then of course they do have third parties that they're working with, and they'll have to show some of that. So I don't know if inXile will be there, but I would love to see that too.
Yeah. And then finally, id Software. I got to give me a shooter in there somewhere. A good id shooter. It's probably way too soon for a new Doom. A new Doom came out literally like a year ago, or a year and a half ago. So it's way too soon for a new Doom. But they do work on other shooters as well. Maybe they might think about making a new shooter IP. It might be had on the works. I like to see something from id Software. They had the Quake online game on PC.
Did that fail? What happened?
I think its reception and popularity kind of went down. I don't think they're supporting it all the way anymore. If I'm gonna say no new content anyway. But I mean, they had a competitive community, but from what I follow from it, it seemed like it had a mixed reception where it couldn't garner enough new players. And some of the older players were, a little jaded by the fact it was more of a hero shooter, even though it still had the hardcore mechanics and the shooting. Some of the hero shooter elements where they had some, abilities and see through walls and all that stuff and different stuff like that. They weren't fans of that, so I think it kind of split their community that way. That's what I think happened from what I observed. So
that's the danger. When you try to go after a new audience and then you slip up and you lose the whole audience and you don't really pick up a new audience, that's definitely the danger. So yeah.
But yeah, for me, Starfield, just to see something new from Bethesda. I'm currently playing on and off again, not all the time. I play Elder Scrolls Online and Fallout 76. So I'm always looking to see what Bethesda has up their sleeve coming up. Maybe some information for another expansion for Fallout 76. That could be in the works. Of course, Elder Scrolls Online has already announced their expansion, so they might show some gameplay of that. And then finally, Fable, because I love Fable. I want to see that return to prominence. And id Software, I gotta have my id Software fast-paced action shooter. They're known for. I love that. It's It's you turn your brain off and kill demons or monsters or Nazis. I love it. I gotta get me one
I
of those.
believe I heard something about Doom Eternal having an update, version 6.66, of course.
Yes.
I think that just came out, or if it hasn't come out, it's like on its way out or something like that. So I don't know, like they might be still tied up in working on Doom Eternal stuff. It could depend. Will, is there anything that you would like to see from Xbox? Like, is there a franchise? Is there a thing that they can do? If it's not a game that exists, what game would you want to see from them? Like, what kind of genre game would be like, that's something I could go after?
Well, I got one short one because you kind of halfway sold me on Contraband. So I'm just kind of like, I think I could kind of get with that.
Yeah.
I like the sound of it. So that's one. But the one thing I remember seeing after looking this stuff up and trying to get a little understanding of what's coming up, I remember Redfall. And I was like, oh, this is something I know I was looking forward to. I actually kind of had my heart set on this one. Because I like the premise of it, and if it's doing what I think it's doing, it's probably going to be kind of either Left 4 Dead, Dead by Daylight kind of style. And if it's if it's going to be in that type of style, then I'm kind of willing to play that because I love the premise of it being, a fictional town in Massachusetts gets taken over by vampires due to something XYZ happened. And I'm just like, oh. And then I see the characters, and I'm just like, these characters are really cool. And I think like the lead character was like a black chick that I've seen I've seen the most of. And I was like,
she looked cool as fuck.
I was like, I want this. It's like you got my attention. Bring this to me. I'm with that. Let me get some people together. We're gonna play this. So that's my one thing that I'm really looking for. Anything else, like if I see it and it piques my interest, I'll write it down and be like, I'll look out for it in the future. But Redfall is my big one.
The one thing, it's good you brought up Redfall. One thing that I thought about that you just made me think about when you said Redfall, that was due out this year, and it was supposed to come out this summer.
Oh, really?
So it makes me wonder, is that like, are they going to announce a delay, or is it going to be like one of those it's available now type things? Are they going to take that kind of risk? Because they can do that now. Like, normally announcing a AAA game and being like, it's out now, is fucking suicide. Like, you can't do that because like you just asking somebody like, hey, you got $70 on you like right now. If you don't, we gonna fucking fail. But if you got Xbox Game Pass, then it's like, yeah, I mean, like we have 30 million subscribers. We'll have like 4 million people playing it the same day. And if people don't want to if people don't have Xbox Game Pass, it's like $15, or I think they still have that $1 deal for the first month going on. You can just go get that and be straight. So I could easily see them doing that. It'd be cool just to randomly be like, surprise, we got a new game out. So that'd be hype. Terrence, is there any game? I know that you're not an Xbox guy, and you are the one, I won't say lone dissenter, but you were the one person who was like, yeah, I don't see myself getting Xbox Game Pass at the moment. Is there a game that you could see from them that you'd be like, I want to try that out?
Oh, now I will say the only reason why I wouldn't get Game Pass because I don't have a gaming PC, so I have to get an Xbox to get Game Pass, and since I don't really see myself getting an Xbox, well, no Game Pass. But I like to just see at this point just something cool from Xbox that's just maybe not shooting related. It just feels like, well, I mean, that's their market. I mean, that's that's essentially Xbox's market, and I have no problem with them, selling what people expect of them. I wouldn't mind seeing more action games from them, and they are kind of heading in that direction with Hellblade 2. I played the first Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. It was really good, and I'm just looking forward to seeing how that game develops. They showed us some gameplay and some cinematic stuff last year, or whenever was the last time we saw it, and it looks cool. I'll admit, like what they showed, it felt more like just a big cinematic showcase more than anything else. It wasn't really anything like truly game.
They said it was gameplay.
Yeah, it was gameplay, but it just kind of looked just like any other game. There wasn't any like real mechanics or any in-depth combat that they showed us. I would just like to see what they plan to what lessons they learned from the first one that they plan to apply to this one. Because like I said, I really like the first game, and so I am curious to see how Hellblade 2 turns out. Like you all have mentioned, Fable. I'm just interested to see how they handle that this generation, because Fable has been gone for quite a while, and I want to see if maybe they take this time to maybe kind of like rebrand it in some kind of way, or like take it in another direction. A game that I didn't really play during the Xbox One generation, but heard so much about, and the community was so strong for it, is Killer Instinct. And I know there was a rumor of potentially Microsoft maybe seeking like a Japanese developer to work on a new Killer Instinct. I mean, we don't know how true that is, but we'll see how that works, Dude,
let me ask y'all, because I'm not a fighting game dude at all. Like, I got Butterfingers. I'm sorry. Would y'all want that? Like, I feel like Killer Instinct. In fact, me and Keen just had this conversation earlier this week about how Killer Instinct is pretty much one of the only, like, one of two games that's like Western only. I guess now you have Skullgirls, but like for the most part, most fighting games are like Japanese developed. Would y'all want to see that, like a Japanese Killer Instinct?
I mean, as long as it's good, I don't really have a problem with it, because it really just depends on what direction they take it in. Because I mean, Iron Galaxy, they're owned by Amazon, I believe now, so you can't get them back, so they have to get someone else. So there's no way around that. It's just it depends on who they get to do it. That's the way that I see it. But I think that franchise will be a waste if they just leave it alone. So I wouldn't mind seeing that return in some way. So if there are games that I would like to see Xbox do, that would definitely be one of them. Just right now, I feel like Xbox just needs some generation defining. Like, I feel like we haven't gotten to that point yet where we're starting to see like really like generation defining games. Maybe when development fully shifts over to this generation instead of like still doing cross-gen stuff, maybe then that's when we'll start to see what this generation is capable of. But for right now, outside of Game Pass and the stuff that we know is to come, it feels like Microsoft, they're still kind of like hiding some stuff. They're building some stuff on the back end, which I think is probably what's going on. Like I mentioned earlier, is that Microsoft, it just feels like they're the company now where they're just making all these big power moves like in the background. And by the end of this decade, we'll truly start to see the fruits of their labor. So yeah, those are the games that I'm curious to see. Like I want to see Hellblade 2. Curious to see what they do with Fable. And I really do hope that they bring back Killer Instinct. I think that would be great, because Xbox, it could definitely use a next-gen fighting game, depending on how Capcom approaches Street Fighter. We don't know. I would imagine Capcom is going to make that multi-platform, but we don't know yet. So, we'll see.
We'll see it.
Hey, Will, did you have something you wanted to throw in?
I wanted to throw in when you had asked about the whole Japanese dev doing Killer Instinct thing. If they do that, in my mind, I don't have a problem with it. But in my heart, I'm just like, can they at least keep that spirit of Killer Instinct somewhat there? Like, I'm not saying they have to carbon copy what was last done, right?
Right.
But at least keep the same spirit, the intensity, and the level of, what Killer Instinct is. Like, don't take it and just make it what we've seen all across the board from Japanese devs. And just to kind of throw a little prick at them, don't you dare delay base my game. So yeah,
I'm sure Microsoft will be on. I would like to think that if Microsoft brings back Killer Instinct, they know they can't do anything less than what was what they did the last one. Yeah. And that's another thing. Like, will they get back people? Will they get back people like Mick Gordon to do the soundtrack? There's a lot of things to consider. So Mick Gordon now, he's not going to come cheap. So
he definitely coming cheap.
Not
out the Doom.
Yeah, Mick Gordon and the id developers had a falling out over some of the process for like the stuff that happened with the soundtrack. They had a big falling out over that. It was very vocal about that. So I don't know how that would work. Now Microsoft, of course, they got the money. Like, hey, we want
money talks.
Y'all gotta see what happens.
Yeah,
but
I think they're
big enough check. A lot of people forget everything. So, I will say I agree with Terrence in that they need something that's not a shooter, but I also think that they have the studios for that. Like, hell, they bought 50 different RPG studios, it feel like, between Obsidian and In Exile and like all these other shits y'all working on, Fable, all of that. Like, y'all ought to be able to make some good RPGs. The Outer Worlds was the game. Like they showed off a
Mhm.
trailer of that, but it was clearly like very early in development. And I mean, like they were working on what's that wannabe Honey I Shrunk Your Kids game?
Oh, I think I know what you're
Grounded.
talking about.
Oh, grounded.
That's it, Grounded. They're working on Grounded. They haven't put out the version 1.0 of that. They're working on Avowed, and then they're also working on the Outer Worlds too. So they're a busy studio. They're a bigger studio than you think. There's Compulsion Games. We didn't talk about that one because it's a very small studio. They did the game We Happy Few.
Yes,
Oh.
yes.
Yeah, they're working on something. They've been working on a game since they got bought, really. So I mean, like, who knows when that pops up? That could pop up here, or it could pop up next year. So they have a lot of variety that they could have. Hopefully, show up this year. And I do think that one of the things I think Terrence is very on point when he says like it will only really be the end of the decade. Like when we look back and have the full scope 2020 vision that we can like hindsight it and be like, okay, they did this, and this, and those things turned out great. Because what you don't want is you don't want to do that Sony thing that they did across like consecutive years where they basically just showed every fucking thing they had for the remainder of the generation, and it was like, you got to 2019 and they were still showing you the same games that they showed you like 2 years ago, and you're like, fuck, y'all, I got nothing else? And it's like, no, we don't have anything else. Like 2020 is gonna be the last year of PlayStation. We don't have nothing else, bro. Like like the quality was there, but as far as the height of the presentations, it was gone because the surprise was gone. And so you got to be careful. You got to like unveil your IPs, a couple at a time. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. Otherwise, you've shown your whole slate. Because like, really, when you think about how long video games take to make now, and how long a console generation is, really only 7 years. Like, you could theoretically plan out all 7 years, judging on how long it's going to take each game to come out. And like, you don't want to blow through all of them too quick. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't think we'll see everything they got going, but hopefully we do see a lot of it. The last thing before we close out, I don't want, like, let's go ahead and get this out. I don't want any more consolidation. Like, that shit, it don't do nothing for me. It don't put no money in my pocket. It don't put no money in our pocket. And more importantly, like, it doesn't bring the competition that's necessary for an industry to thrive. But do y'all think, could you see like Microsoft buying a Japanese developer? And if so, which one? So, Will, do you see them buying a Japanese developer? And like, which would be the one that you're like, yeah, I can see them like go ahead and scooping them up?
Before we got to this question, I was slightly thinking about it a little bit. I was like, let me run through the list of companies that I know that are strictly Japanese in my head. And I was asking myself, could they get them? No. Could they get them? No. Could they get them? No. And I think a lot of the problem that's going to come with them getting a Japanese company is that Japanese companies do not bend well when it comes to change. So I feel like if they are going to get one, I couldn't even tell you who they would get, because it would have to take a real outlier for them to actually get a Japanese dev. And I myself, I'm just like you. I don't want no more consolidation. But I think a Japanese dev with Microsoft would give them a lot more goodwill in Japan, because if you've seen the history with Xbox in Japan, they ain't do too hot here and there, especially because them folks put so much money when the Xbox 360 and Xbox One came out. Like, they had stuff on the streets, banners.
Launch party photos be looking so sad.
They do, bro. And it's so pitiful. I'm just like, come on, man. The Xbox
like
really ain't
there.
hitting. Exactly. Like 10 people there on the floor, maybe a DJ. The bartender ain't serving no drinks to nobody. He just kind of back there just shaking the shaker just because. So I'm just kind of like, bruh, what's wrong with y'all in Japan? Do y'all not like it? But then when I think about it, it makes sense, at least during those times, because like Terrence said, they big on shooters on Xbox. And I feel like that's not the demographic you're going to be hitting in Japan. You're going to hit Japan mostly with JRPGs and probably
it does alright over there.
You can bring.
It don't like destroy it, but it does alright over there. It sells well pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, I know. So that's why I'm kind of like, I don't see them getting one. The only way they do it is if they do these games right and let these companies do exactly what they need to. But other than that, Microsoft with a Japanese dev, I'm going to give them some years to kind of figure out who they may want before they decide they want something. Because if they pick the wrong one and the games they put out don't hit, that Xbox will forever just kind of be lost in Japan.
I mean, I agree to an extent, because I do feel like Microsoft has talked about trying to improve the Japanese relations. Like every so often, Phil Spencer will tweet out something about like, yeah, you know, our relationships in Japanese have never been more important to us, and then they'll kind of sort of prove it because like if I'm not mistaken, the first time we saw Kingdom Hearts 3 was at a Microsoft conference.
Yeah,
I know for certain Devil May Cry 5, that was the first time we saw them like Capcom. Yeah. Like they got to talk through with Capcom. They was like, no, fuck Sony. We want that. Like they and then like Phantasy Star. Like Sony had the opportunity to pony up for that and they didn't. They was like, nah, we ain't coming off nothing. And Microsoft was like, bet, we'll pay for it. Like we'll pay to have it localized and bring it over here and it'll only be on Xbox. Which I mean, like, to their credit, I don't blame them. Like, I'm not doing that multi-platform. Fuck y'all. Like, you had the opportunity to pay for it and you didn't want to. So, like, no, we get to reap the benefits of that. Rakeem, what game, like, do you see them getting a Japanese developer? And if so, which one?
Platinum. Immediately. As soon as I thought about it, it's not even a debate. They already worked with them on a previous project, even though it got canceled. When I think about Platinum, their whole culture is combat, twitch reflexes that fits right in with the Xbox culture. Right now, Platinum just came off of a really bad sale with Babylon's Fall that got lambasted. They kind of need something to kind of build themselves back up. They're the perfect support studio for combat games. They've basically been the support studio of the entire industry. When people want to get like better combat in their games, they'll literally get Platinum to come in and do just their combat because they're so good at doing combat. That would be a great support system for like a new AAA third-person action game for like Xbox with Platinum as either a support studio or the heading studio doing the combat for that game. I feel like they would fit in perfectly with that culture. If I were to get a developer, I think Platinum would fit because they kind of fit in with like, we all know that like Xbox is the shooter, you know, multiplayer predominant console, and just having another studio that can help them with combat and like really getting that good feel of combat, I think that's something that Xbox will be looking forward to, especially now that like Platinum, they probably need a little support because, you know, it's I don't know when Bayonetta 3 is coming out. They would have to finish that first, obviously, but we all know that they take a long time between different projects. Some of their smaller projects don't always pan out well, like the ones where like they take out, you know, IPs for like game, you know, animes and cartoons and stuff like that.
Hold on. You know what I don't like about Platinum?
What's that?
Everybody else knows that to some extent. Like I know they listen to it. Feel like this is not what's happening, but this is what I feel like is what's happening. It feels like they listen too much to gamers, and you know, gamers, they never satisfied. They always want a new IP. They always new IP. It's like they be like, fuck the sequels. All I want is new IP. And Platinum plays a little too much into that. And it can work sometimes, but I'm gonna be honest. Getting it right the first time is really hard. And iteration is usually the name of the game. And you iterate on a game, you like look at what worked, what didn't, and you improve on it. And they don't want it. Feel like it's always some new IP coming out. Like no. Take one of the ones that fucking worked, like Astral Chain or whatever, and like iterate on that. Make a sequel. Make that game better. And then like the thing is, people don't want to try new IP. They don't. They're not really big on that. Like sometimes a new IP will sell, but you know what sells better than a new IP? The sequel to that, a new IP once it's already been established. That motherfucker really sell. So like, to sit there and always try to generate new IP, it's admirable, but like that's kind of how you got in the situation that you in. Like you always trying to try new shit, which I congratulate you for, but like at the level that y'all at, like unless you're trying to switch, like go downscale and make a whole bunch of fucking pixel art type RPGs, pixel art games, you gonna keep running into these problems because it's hard. It's hard as shit to make a really quality new IP. You're not gonna knock it out of the park every time. My bad, man. Keep going.
Oh yeah, but yeah, that was the main one I was thinking of. If Xbox would acquire a studio, that was instantly. As soon as I thought about it, my mind went straight to Vanquish, and like how the combat game was like revolutionary. Even though it didn't sell very well, but like playing that game left a hell of an impact on me. Like it was such an interesting experience, so fun. And it felt like right along the lines of what an Xbox exclusive would have been back then. Like it would have jumped right in there. So I thought about Platinum. That's the first thing that came to my mind.
That is a great choice. Like I do think that at some point they're gonna wind up like Obsidian. Now, the thing we found out about Obsidian, if you like did your research, like there was some games media that talked and did like an in-depth discussion with Obsidian. Turned out they had been trying to be bought for years. Platinum has said they kind of want their independence if they do get bought, but they're open to being bought. Kind of like Ubisoft recently said, like we're not closed off to it. It's expensive, like I said, to make video games. So I mean, I maybe the only thing I would want, and they probably would be upset about it, but like somebody needs to rein them in and be like, oh, this worked. Make another one of those. You can make a new IP afterwards, but iterate on this, improve on what worked. Terrence, what Japanese developer could you see being like, yeah, I mean, we could go along with y'all?
For the longest time, I think the one that people thought was a sure thing was Sega. And it's kind of wild that Microsoft didn't buy them because it just seemed like Sega was so buddy with Microsoft for so long. And you all mentioned Phantasy Star Online. That seemed like that was like the perfect segue into them buying Sega. But it didn't happen. So maybe something behind the scenes fell through, or maybe Sega didn't want to get bought. Who knows? In terms of who I think Microsoft could go with, man, I really don't know. That was an interesting one that Rakeem brought up, Platinum. I kind of, in the back of my head, I was kind of thinking of that, but, as he talked it out, I was like, yeah, I could see Microsoft benefiting from an acquisition like that. I feel like Platinum would give them the kooky Japanese games that they need to really start maybe making more of a mark in Japan, or even just getting like the traditional Japanese, like people who love Japanese games in general, to maybe start to check Xbox out. So I think that's really what they need at this point, is that they need a developer that's going to give them some titles that people are going to give a damn about. I don't know. I don't see them buying like Square, Capcom. Like that just doesn't. I don't know. I don't want to see that, and I don't see it. I just don't see that. Like if they were like if the headline came out like tomorrow that Microsoft bought Square, I'd be kind of like, that just doesn't sound right. And maybe that's the thing, is just Microsoft buying any big Japanese studio, it just doesn't. I don't know. I can't quite picture it in my head. Maybe when it actually happens, then it'll make sense. But I don't know. No one in particular just comes to mind for me other than Sega, just because it seemed like that was set up so perfectly. But I will say what Rakeem mentioned about what's the company you mentioned? I'm blanking now. Platinum. Yeah, Platinum. I will say them buying Platinum, I could see something like that working in their favor. That makes sense to me. So I guess if there's any answer I have, I'll go with that.
Okay, so two things. I'm gonna get you, Will. Do you feel like you couldn't see it because you don't think Microsoft would be willing to spend that money, or because Japan would, like a Japanese developer would be like, no, bro, we straight?
A mixture of both. I don't know, because it really just depends on who's Microsoft is trying to buy. If they were to try to buy someone bigger, I think there would definitely be some resistance to that. But if it's a studio that maybe has some promise, but no one really knows about them, like on like a bigger scale.
Tabata's new studio.
What's that?
Hajime Tabata, the guy that made Final Fantasy 15. I could see that.
Oh, yeah.
Like he struck off on his own, made his own whole AAA studio. I could like, that's a small studio, small-ish. I could see that. Like, I mean, it'd be easier for us, like that type thing.
Yeah, I guess like they could go after these new teams that are like spun off from maybe like somebody who's like a lead on a certain game. They went up to start their own studio. I could see something like that happening. It really just depends on what angle Microsoft takes. Like I guess throughout this episode, just the recurring theme is that Microsoft is always doing some stuff in the background. So while we're not seeing up front right now what the fruit of all that is, I think in the long run is when we'll start to see it.
All right. Well, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna add kind of on to what Terrence said. I do kind of agree with him about it could have been Sega, and like y'all mentioned with Phantasy Star, there was also during that time. I think the other reason why he mentioned the buddy thing between Sega and Microsoft was because remember when the Dreamcast was a thing?
Well, yeah,
And
that
All right,
too.
so you basically got where I was about to go. Because basically the Xbox the first Xbox is basically just Dreamcast 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically that. So I felt like Sega kind of started jumping a lot of their games into the Xbox, and they're just like, well, the Dreamcast can't really work no more, so we got to push these projects that we had in mind towards this. And the other thing about them, possibly, if they could have gotten Sega at least in this current time, I think the one thing that probably would have halfway stopped them from getting Sega was the fact that Sega has Atlas as well right now. So with Sega and Atlas being kind of like a combo thing, you'd be removing a certain little franchise away from certain systems unless they choose to do the thing that they're doing now with like Activision and so on, with like keeping certain games multi-platform.
I think with Activision, they're trying to keep that multi-platform just because Call of Duty is such a
Yeah.
massive fucking franchise,
Yeah.
and it's just not worth it. Like it's easier to just say you don't have to pay for Call of Duty. You can you don't have to pay yearly for Call of Duty. You don't have to pay $70. You can just pay 15, and you have Game Pass, and it'll work out like that.
Yeah.
Especially if you know. But yeah, other than that, yeah, I don't. I think if they were to buy Sega Persona, nah. What's up, King?
Now I think about it, if I'm not mistaken, Xbox has already acquired Tango Gameworks. The gentleman.
Yeah,
that,
I mean, like
Oh yeah, they did.
they didn't acquire Tango Gameworks. They acquired Bethesda, who already owned Tango
Oh,
Gameworks.
that's correct.
So, yeah.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. That's right. That's right by acquisition.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think when I thought about like kind of what Terrence said and what Will said, like one of the reasons I think they immediately said like I don't know what the Japanese developers would get like. I thought about the NBA, how you can have like star players to go to certain teams and they just don't fit that team's culture. They don't fit that team's coaching.
Mhm.
And it's like the reason it's kind of hard to think about them acquiring a lot of different developers is like some of these Japanese developers don't fit that Xbox mold of what their consumers like are looking for. I know obviously they're trying to acquire them because they want to branch out to the Japanese audience. But it might not necessarily be a great fit depending on how they acquire them. I guess that might be the issue.
Okay, so let me counter that because I'm seeing y'all kind of agree. The Xbox culture of 2013 is not the Xbox culture that they're aiming to have by 2024, 2025.
Right.
Like all that the shooter, you know, the meme with Halo, Gears, Forza, that shit is on its way out. Not to say that those franchises are on their way out, but like as a collective company, as Xbox, and I don't want to say Microsoft because Xbox feels like it's a big enough brand under which you can just say Xbox. Xbox as a culture now seems like they're trying to be really wider than Sony. Like Sony has, you know, for a while they had that Sony meme. It was a console war meme that had a sliver of a point. Like all the Sony games looked the same, and then what they meant was that it was all third person action RPG-ish open world type things. The environments didn't look the same, the settings weren't the same, but they were kind of similar in the genre. Yeah. I feel like Xbox is like, no, we're not gonna be that. We're gonna have our shooters, we're gonna have our first person games, we're gonna have our third person games, we're gonna have our racing game, we're gonna have our compulsion games with the We Happy Few, like whatever that's gonna be something weird, right? Well, I think we can all agree, like the studio that makes We Happy Few ain't gonna make some fucking mainstream RPG, like that ain't finna happen. The people that made Hellblade, they're not gonna make like that game. While it might sell, it's not gonna be like your safe type game. The only thing safe about it is that it's a sequel to an IP that already did very well. And then you see all these RPGs that they're trying to bring in. The identity that they had is not the identity that they're trying to have in the future. And so with Japan, like they might, like what they clearly want is to establish the same kind of global foothold that Sony's had for years. Sony has, because Sony's always had a foothold in Japan, and they've always had a foothold in Europe, and they've always done great over here, even though it's been more of a back and forth in America. So like I can easily see them buying, like I totally see them shelling out the money for it. And we talked a little bit about earlier how like Terrence talked about how like, yeah, the time to buy Square and the time to buy Capcom was when they was down. I disagree. From a corporation's perspective, the time to buy them is when they up. Like,
yeah,
oh,
I mean that is true. Yeah, I mean that is true. Yeah.
Like y'all got a lot going for you. Come here. Like let me see what we can get up off you. Like that's the time.
I guess in terms of like how much it would have cost them, it would have been less.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you were thinking from the perspective, I believe. I'm not gonna let me not assume, but like I think you were thinking from the perspective of a fan. Like, okay, they kind of need help now. You can help them. Like they ain't trying to help. They trying to like get you at your best, and so you can help them get better. And so that's where they're at. Like Square right now is putting out IPs, it's generating old IPs at like a phenomenal rate. They constantly putting out new IP, well, not new IP, new iterations of classic IPs that they have. Some of them are working really well, some of them not so well, but like they're doing it. And Capcom, they pretty much back to their old Capcom status. The only thing they need to do is branch out beyond like 3 IPs, but like they're still making a lot of hits. And that's the time that like they could easily shell out and be like, look, come here, let me get that. And so,
I guess would you argue is that the reason why nobody wants to buy Konami? They hadn't proven themselves yet.
Please buy Konami. If what I was talking about earlier, somebody please buy Konami. Do it
for me. Konami's weird. Also, I need to bring up Sega, and I guess I'll come back to Konami. Sega, I don't think they're in the market. I was gonna say Sega, but then the more that y'all talked about it, the more I realized Sega's probably not looking to be bought no more. Yeah. And there's a difference between, I mean, like again, money talks. So if they put up enough money, they'll sell. Everybody will. I mean, like unless you're just staunchly against it from a principle standpoint, eventually, like your investors are like, "Hey, man, why we ain't selling? Like it's money to be made here." But like Sega, like if you listen to what they talked about last year, they talked about how they wanted to make a new super game, and what they meant was like we want a massively successful worldwide. They wanted Fortnite. They wanted a Fortnite of their own, so to speak. And they were gonna they were looking at all of their old IPs. I don't know if y'all saw this, but like there was a Bloomberg report that talked about how they were gonna try to bring back Crazy Taxi and Jet Set Radio, and they were gonna try to make AAA versions of those to try and find that next big hit. They wanted that. I mean, I can see I don't know about Crazy Taxi, but I can see Jet Set Radio if you like added enough features to it, you made it a AAA game, you give it like a maybe a battle royale mode on the side. It's not the main mode, but it's a side thing. I can kind of see that. And then they were looking at a whole bunch of their other old IPs that they thought like, can we bring these back and elevate them and find some kind of big hit? And that to me don't sound like a team that's looking to be bought. I could be wrong, but that don't sound like somebody that's looking to be bought. But like with Konami, such a weird one. Because it is like when I was saying like, you don't want to get bought while you're down. You want to get bought while you're up. And they're not technically down. Like they're not, I don't think they're unprofitable. But I think what it is they don't have any IPs. Like all their IPs are defunct. You'd have to like build all their IPs back up. You'd have to build back Suikoden. You'd have to build back Castlevania. You'd have to build back Metal Gear Solid. You'd have to build back Silent Hill.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have to build back the motherfuckers. And that's work. And like I know people was talking about maybe Sony might do something with them. And there was a rumor that Silent Hill was in the works, but that rumor's been off and on for a while. So it's either one of two things with Silent Hill. Either it's a lie or the shit was so early in development that it was like, you might as well not have told us about this. We're not going to hear about it for like 5-6 years. So I don't know what the status of that is. But yeah, Konami is definitely a studio you could buy, but like they also have too much extra shit going on for them. They got Yu-Gi-Oh! And like, so basically that would be Microsoft now is the sole owner of Yu-Gi-Oh! That shit would be so weird.
Oh, wow.
Like,
dang, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that like that's the type of shit you got to feel like they own the Yu-Gi-Oh!
Shit.
Like, do they even want that? I mean, I guess they can use that as like their proof of concept for AR. They can do that.
Oh, that'd be kind of loud.
Come out with the dual disc and augmented reality dual disc and shit. I guess they could do that, but I don't know if that's a thing that they aiming to do. But yeah, I mean, I was gonna say Sega, but now I'm in the camp of Rakeem. I think he hit on something with Platinum. Platinum is a studio that I could absolutely see, because they already said they want to work with Microsoft again, and that's not the same as saying you want to be bought. But like, as we saw with Insomniac, if you work with a studio, if you work with a publisher long enough, eventually you develop that working relationship, and it's just like, well, why don't we just sell to them? And why don't we just work under that umbrella and we have that safety net if things aren't working out? So I can see that. And the other studios, it just depends on how much money Microsoft is willing to spend, because they're also looking at buying WB Games if they can get it for a price that they want. So who fucking knows? Mm-hmm. But I think that's gonna wrap it up for this week's episode. If you enjoyed us, I need a few things from you. I need you to do us a favor. I need you to hit that subscription button on YouTube. Follow us on TikTok. Follow us on Twitter. Tell your friends about us, and do me a favor. Have an excellent week. Peace.